Hi, welcome to your intuitive channeling. This is collective. I'm doing it for a specific time during the Scorpio new moon in November 2025, but I do intend on the messages to be timeless. So, yeah, if it resonates, stick around. If it doesn't, please don't stick around. Like, genuinely, don't do that to yourself, you know? So, very interesting energy. This is very interesting energy. A lot of what's happening in the sky right now is happening right on top of my chart and its placement. So I'm within the belly of the transformation that's happening right now. I can feel it so viscerally, and I feel extremely excited for the most part. I got some notes. Writing and like retaining information beforehand for the first time in a really, really long time. Again, a lot of these transformations are highly likely happening on a very internal, deeply subconscious level, in fact, considering the energy of Scorpio. And an interesting fact or an interesting thing, I don't know, when I say interesting fact, it's like an interesting fact. No, it's just like a feature of this time, I guess, is that this new moon in Scorpio is happening across Vedic and tropical, which in my opinion intensifies whatever archetype Scorpio represents, because I know that with considering that it's happening in the same sign from different astrological points of view. Yeah, the points of view may be different in terms of how you look at the Scorpio archetype. So if you're on this level of like trying to understand astrology, then I'd highly suggest getting into that and seeing how both points acknowledge Scorpio energy. I think it would be really helpful as well for personal development, which is the big thing right now, which in my opinion is the most exciting thing because of how a lot of the living experience has been, we've been eluded from thinking that life happens internally and from the inside out. And as I've been repeating, and as we've all been saying and realizing more of, and we will realize even more of, is how much of our external world is influenced by our internal world. Again, because of the emphasis of scorpionic energy, you can expect a lot of internal world shifts where you get a much more intense, like detailed vision of you and of your emotional map more than anything. The first point I've written here, speaking to do with emotions, I wrote that, so obviously Scorpio, secrets. So very natural that you can assume that there are secrets that are going to come out. But I think that these secrets even further have to do with the internal world, with your emotions. So you might find a lot of new revelations about the way that you feel about a situation where that feeling was so set in stone. You never thought it would change. And to do with the next point I wrote is that I believe that, to extend on that it's likely that a lot of our collective, a lot of us are going to come into new feelings about people where the feelings were previously concrete, and they become more fluid because you're finding out more about how this person works internally. And obviously that will affect you because it mirrors your principles, or it brings light to your principles, because you may find that the way that someone works internally is not something that you agree with. It's not something that you yourself would embody. It may even be something that you vowed you wouldn't accept in yourself or in others. Maybe something that you thought, if someone has this characteristic in them, or if someone thinks this way, or if someone would do this to me, then it means they're this kind of person. That whole structure changes, where it's like, oh shit, maybe they're not this kind of person, or oh shit, I'm going to have to let this person go and stick by the moral codes I've set for myself. Personal moral codes are definitely going to be challenged as well. Just in terms of like opening the way that you lensed darkness and shadow and bad things and, shit like that. I feel also this is a very Capricornian characteristic to be, yeah, it's Capricornian. I've seen this pattern in Capricorns. They're very strict about who they keep around them. And they judge very, very harshly, very strictly on people's characters and behaviors. And they're very principled about, if this person does this thing, you do not belong in my life. I think a lot of Capricorns are going to go through a little bit of a shift in that, in terms of practicing more compassion or forgiveness or understanding, and not immediately cutting people off. Although I do feel that there may be a lot of that, a lot of cutting relationships off. Considering Mercury is it's retrograding in tropical Sag, there's going to be a lot of like quick speech, mouth reactions, from very deep wounded places that will cause a lot of changes and transformations in personal relationships. The whole point, if you do experience that from your lens and point of view, is to open up in the heart. So if you can, I think for me, something I've learned about conflict from my lens and the kind of person I am is that if you apply a little love on it, it stops becoming such an intense point of conflict. Conflict is good. It's healthy. And balancing that with a sense of compassion and love and remembrance that if that's something you want to rock with in the moment, this is someone you care about, or this is a situation you care about, whatever. Holding that before everything else, or with this sense of conflict and tension, really helps. Applying love on things really helps. I didn't finish the first point that I'd written, and I think it's important to do with the emotion factor that I'd mentioned earlier. I'd said, secrets revealed to do with deep wounds, likely to do with a trigger on emotional security. So yeah, something or some place or situation that used to feel extremely safe for you might not feel safe anymore, might not feel as safe. And that has to do with the trust issues that I'd mentioned earlier as well, that you may develop some, or you may have an answer to a trust issue that's been building up. That emotional security, the trigger on emotional security would imply that what's coming up is the need for you to look or analyze your emotional safety, where you've placed it, and the root of that, and see if you can build a new foundation. So for example, I'm getting the sense of, say you're in a relationship and you're learning new things about your partner that's helping you understand or take new, hold on. Okay, sorry. I was about to go way off and I can simplify this. The sense of being in a relationship and being in union with someone and needing or coming to the realization or the challenge lesson of needing to individuate in order to be able to show up in a better, more truthful, more grounded way in your union, that kind of thing, and that kind of thing happening in very close relationships, not just romantic, but deeply platonic, best friend connections, parent-child connections, and obviously all linking, everything, all of life. We are viewing all of life from that parent-child connection, right? So obviously, holding in mind that is the center. That's the root of what we're working with, our inner child, and how that child did with the parents that they got. Very deep. Oh, ow, ow, hurt. Like, it hurts so bad. So lots of crying, lots of triggering crying. I woke up watching a video crying this morning as if I was on my period, and I just finished it. So up and down and up and down and up and down. Be open to really feeling your emotional range. I'm sure that's been the case this whole Scorpio season, honestly, but I do think there's going to be something really pressed on that part of your living experience. I think for about the next week or two as well, considering that we are in the middle of Mercury retrograde, and I think it only ends next week. Then I have that all of this work is linking to a greater sense of freedom, which has to do with the heart expansion, which is the work we've been doing for years. And I wrote the sense of freedom that could be felt when leaving a narcissistic relationship, where you have a greater connection with your sense of self. And I immediately imaged the picture of Nicole Kidman leaving the courtroom after her divorce from Tom Cruise was finalized. That, you know what I mean? That's exactly what we're going through, but you have to still go to court, right? and sit through the proceedings. So that's essentially what this is. That's what we are in this period, specifically this new moon, all in preparation again for, I think, honestly, what will, again, I say, be the most exciting years. It's something about next year, honestly, 2026, feels very reminiscent of what 2010 felt like for South Africa. Whatever the vibe was for us, for the world, but South Africa was like the heart of it, it was happening there in our country, I think. Okay, yeah, let me specifically say for South Africans, we are going to have such an exciting year next year. I'm so excited because this year was, anyway, we are building up and doing work for that so that we can show up next year with even more of the energetic shifts and changes, with all of our truth and all of our sense of selves intact, all of the layers and aspects of ourselves that we may have abandoned in different traumatic situations that are all being triggered up right now. Almost all at the same time as well. That's what I'm getting. So that you may feel a lot of emotional pressure. You may try to go about your day keeping it together, and you do. And shout out, because I know I'm reading for people and intuiting for people who keep their shit together, you keep it together, going about your day on autopilot. Then at the end of the day, you go through a physical pain, maybe you find yourself going through back pains. This pain here, though, specifically, where this is very bruised, you've been working out the whole day. You've been doing energetic and emotional work the whole day. Or you come to the end of the day and you feel extremely exhausted, so exhausted, where you're like a child, where you want to cry because you're so tired. Or you want to cry because you're so hungry. Or you want to cry because you just don't want to do anything, Yeah. A lot of that, those sense of childhood sensations, child sensations, which you should be extremely patient and compassionate for yourself for, because you're still holding it together, At the end of the day, you can trust yourself to show up. When you don't feel like showing up, you feel like breaking down, give yourself room to do that and forgive and really be open to that, Don't beat yourself up while you're in the moment and say, no, get it together. You can't be crying like this. No, that's not. Make sure your inner voice isn't saying that, because that's the root of, as well, the work that we're doing. It's for a greater sense of love for the self and deeper sense of connection with the self. And then the last sentence I wrote here was making more of what's yours, and leaving the rest to God for real. So to do with this freedom and a greater sense of self, when you are deeply connected with yourself, knowing that yourself is connected to the divine, that connection with the divine will remind you as well that everybody's as connected to the divine as you are. So they have their own divinity. They have their own relationship with their divinity that has nothing to do with you. And you don't have to stay focused or even look at that, because you have a whole and full connection with your own divine, knowing and trusting that so do they. So that all you need to focus on is your connection with the divine, and whatever that looks like in how you externalize and carry that out. This is, of course, speaking as well to people who are you actually dedicated to this, because some people can go through their whole lives never being aware of this sense and never taking it so seriously that they find activities and things to do that correlate with that divine connection, where you are actually spilling and doing work into that, not just going to church every week, like holding God in your mind, or keeping as blissful and as a neutral of a state of mind, knowing that that in itself is God. So focusing on the breath, focusing on presence, doing that work, which also should be very intensely kept up, maintained. If you are a Capricorn, a Virgo placement, a Scorpio or a Pisces placement, or an Aquarius placement, those placements I felt feeling called right now to remind you that you need to keep up with your spiritual hygiene. It is so especially intrinsically important. Even if you are just trying to activate your breath from time to time, or you're doing job in maintaining your posture and being present and being aware of your thoughts, little things like that really compound to keeping you well and stable. I do feel that those are the signs deeply susceptible to being, to going through, to falling ill, essentially, but largely because of your lack of spiritual hygiene or a lack of awareness, or because some place in your subconscious is trying to come out and speak to you that you've been neglecting and pushing away. I also reference those signs because those are the signs that tend to do that. We really tend to push it away, suppress, internalize, avoid. We're very good at channeling our awareness so precisely and strictly that we completely ignore everything else. And a lot of that shit's going to come out now, regardless of the sign, actually. A lot of what has been really lodged inside the shadows, not just hidden, but hidden inside the hidden parts. You know what I mean? That stuff is really going to come out. But again, it's going to be a sense of freedom. Very, very freeing after this. It's going to hurt. It's going to hurt. But again, as I've been saying in previous readings, this is not pain you're unfamiliar with. This is not pain that you haven't trained for. It's really exactly like training for the High Rocks event, and then you do the High Rocks event. Obviously, that's just not easy. You're going to be sweating, your muscles tense, and at the end of the day, your legs are going to be sore, like running a race. You're going to be exhausted. You're going to fall to the ground, and But we did it. We knew it was going to be difficult. We knew it would be difficult. I have to find that video and link that in the description because it's funny, and the messaging of it. If you can, adding humor to things as well is very helpful. If you, it helps me to remember that video anytime I'm going through some really crazy shit. And what else? I just record that guy's voice going left, right, left, right, left, right, because that's the vibe. You just have to keep going. Just keep going. You're fine. You're okay. Okay. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It does matter. It's probably the craziest shit ever. It hurts so bad, but you're okay. You'll be okay. And all is well. It really is. And we're building up to such an exciting period of time in our lives. Like it's crazy. Every time I feel into it, and because of how it's approaching, like it's getting bigger and bigger, it's becoming more and more like okay, this is yeah, no. Awful, right? Very scary. And obviously, if it's actually happened to me, I think I'd faint. I don't know. But because of my general fascination with like life, earth, nature, I like I like to imagine, to kind of get that sense of and like awe. I like to imagine the sensation, to experience the sensation of a huge wave towering over you, you know, and facing the reality of the essence of that experience would be facing the reality of like life, you know, or imagine the sensation of going to space. That's what this feels like, where it feels we're all in a spaceship and we're approaching the the clearing of seeing the stars in the sky and the planets and like, and essentially facing the grandness, the grandeur, the wow of life, the wow of it. This feeling has obviously been persisting, I think, throughout the year. If you've been putting intentional work in being still, paying attention, meditating, all of that, then you would have felt bits of it. You know, I do think the sensation's been coming in waves. I think more people have been coming into sensations of like brief, even if brief, moments of awe and like, whoa, I'm a human, you know, in a body, skin. What is this? And and yeah, a lot of people are experiencing it. It's unsettling for some, really exciting for others. But as long as, you know, we keep going, keep not feeling that sensation and facing it with like intentional excitement, that shit's medicine for us. We need to start feeling more excited about being alive. And that's what's coming, actually. And that's all I have. I felt really, really excited to deliver this channeling today. So I really hope it helps. And I hope that it helps in like keeping you connected to your sense of empowerment and in knowing that things are going to be fine. Everything's going to be okay. Life is a journey. It's, yeah, for those who get it, life is a baller, okay? It really is. We have so much in store for us. Let's keep going. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next live stream.